Good evening, everybody. I'll just let everyone join the feed, give you a minute to grab a drink. The last Liberty Chat of the series, very exciting. I'm sorry I'm late. We had internet issues again at Parliament House. I'm not sure if they're blocking the feed. Not a conspiracy theory. Running on WA time. It's only 4:30 in WA, so hello to my fellow sand gropers if you're watching. I'm ready to go in my Lib Dems hat, my Team Cook shirt for Ian Cook, of course, in Mulgrave. I've got my Tim Quilty stubby holder. Good evening, everybody. Okay, we'll get started. Hello, welcome to the last episode of our Liberty Chat Victorian State Election Series. I'm your host, Kate Fantanell, or Lady Liberty. I'm in Parliament House in Victoria in Melbourne. I've been on the battleground for a few months now, helping the fantastic team here in Victoria. 3 days to go to the election. November 26, 6 o'clock, the polls close. We've been doing pre-poll since last week. I know a lot of people have been out there every day, including Tim Quilty, who's been at pre-poll since 8 o'clock every morning. David Limbrick as well has been working the booths. We've had some volunteers out there every day. Rain, hail or shine, it's Melbourne. It's been Melbourne weather. I've been missing the sun in Perth, but I'm so happy to be here. It's such a privilege. And it is one of the most important elections, not only in the state of Victoria's history, but in Australia's history and in the history of the Liberal Democrats, which has been around since 2001. The party has grown so much here. It's really warmed my heart. Unfortunately, it's come at the cost of a pandemic and government overreach, which has been quite traumatic in Victoria and Melbourne. I've heard a lot of stories from people since I've been here. And that's why I'm here, to help get David and Tim re-elected and hopefully some more fantastic Lib Dems in the upper house and also the lower house. So tonight we have our Western Victorian candidates, Paul Barker and hopefully Julia McGrath. She's got a little baby at home, so she's just messaged to say she might not make it, but hopefully she does. We won't hold it against her if she doesn't. I know everyone's been busy. And then in the second half of the show, we'll hear from some of our fantastic lower house candidates. Some of them have been on the show before, some of them new faces. And yeah, it's going to be a really great show. So please, if you have any questions, get involved, have a drink, relax. The last episode in the series, as I said, so it's been a long few weeks, a long 4 years. So let's go out with a bang. Now, to start with tonight, as I mentioned, we are heading to Western Victoria, one of the important regions. And I'm just looking at my list now, and none of the candidates from Western Victoria are on the feed, so I'm not sure what's happened. Paul Barker, maybe he's been kicked off. He is a bit of a troublemaker. That's why we love him. But he has been lost from the feed, so I'm going to change things up a bit. I am going to start with the two doctors. That's right. We have two doctors running for us in the lower house. I'll bring them into the feed now. We have Dr. Julian Fidge, who is running in Ovens Valley, and also Dr. Richard Peppard, who is running in the seat of Hawthorn. Thank you, gentlemen. Please bear with me, and thanks for being first up. We'll start with the doctors. Why not? Now, I'll just give you both a bit of an introduction. So both of you have run as candidates before at the federal election. Dr. Julian Fidge is running in the seat of Ovens Valley, which has Tim Quilty in the upper house of Northern Victoria. He's a local GP in Wangaratta. He's been a local CFA lieutenant, second-generation farmer, president of a local karate club. And at the federal election, he ran in the seat of Indi, which was won by independent Helen Haynes, but he recorded 2.3% of the vote. And in your pitch for running, you said, personal freedoms are very important to me, which is one of the reasons I'm standing as a candidate in this election. You've also talked about an appeal with the Victorian Supreme Court, which we'll ask you about. But first of all, Dr. Fidge, can you please tell us how you became a libertarian?
Oh, thanks, Kate. So my family's quite politically aware, and I've been aware of the libertarian principles since I was a young adult. I've been active in local state and federal politics for the last 10 years now that I've settled down. And I met Tim Quilty when we both stood for this federal seat about 8 years ago. So when we both continued our involvement, Tim recruited me in the Liberal Democrats, and I'm very happy with the way the libertarian principles are applied to our policies in the campaigns. And I think that we will go from strength to strength. I think that libertarian principles are the way of the future for the Australian population.
And I'll just ask you quickly about your experience in the federal election. So 2.3% of the vote is what you got, which, you know, great job, fantastic. That was up there with our Senate candidates. What did you find were the key issues people were talking to you about during the federal campaign and then compared to the state election?
So the big thing in the federal campaign was the IBAC, the Anti-Corruption Commission, and Helen Haynes is very popular here, and she's made that a big issue. The up here it's a four-sided contest because of Helen Haynes. There's Liberals, Nationals, Labor, and Helen Haynes, and that's why the minor parties get such low percentages, and 2.5%. To give you some indication, the Nationals only got 3.5%. So we did quite well.
And compared to this election, have you found that, obviously Labor won the federal, what is the thoughts on the ground in your electorate in terms of this election and Labor specifically? Have people been telling you it's time for change, or what's the mood like out in Ovens Valley?
So Ovens Valley is in the northeast of Victoria, and it's a very conservative seat. Having said that, of course, they did elect Helen Haynes. The rural seats are usually quite conservative, and Daniel Andrews is actually from here, and I know many people who went to school with him, and there is not a kind word to be said about Daniel anywhere in this electorate.
Wow. I'm wearing a Team Cook shirt, as I mentioned before. We're not running a candidate in Mulgrave against Daniel Andrews. Lib Dems are supporting Ian Cook. So if you see people wearing a Lib Dem hat and an Ian Cook shirt, we really want to support Ian in that electorate. So those of us who've criticised us for not running a candidate, we don't want to split the vote. We want Ian to get elected. So interesting to see that Daniel Andrews is from your area. Now, I just had a question about the recently filed an appeal with the Victorian Supreme Court against a decision by VCAT. So can you just give us a little background about that case and for the listeners who haven't heard the story before?
Sure. So the problem with being a doctor at the moment is we're not allowed to talk about medical issues if it contradicts what the medical authorities, the public health authorities are saying. And the problem is the public health authorities are made up of the dregs of medicine. These are the people who cannot survive. They cannot work in the public system or the private system, so they become public servants. They're the people who hate patients, or patients don't like them, or they find the job too difficult, and so they go into public service. And 99 years out of 100, it doesn't matter. But then you have something like this happen, and all of a sudden these people who know very, very little medicine and very little science are making these absurd decisions, and doctors who are actually well qualified are not allowed to contradict them. So I've contradicted them a couple of times, and I've been punished by the medical board, and I challenged that in the tribunal, and the tribunal generally set aside the decision of the board, but they still said that I'm not allowed to undermine the public health authorities, and I've taken that to the Supreme Court because I don't think there's any law in Australia which says that they can do that. I think that I'm allowed to contradict the government whenever I like in Australia, and I don't think there's any legislation which says that I have to agree with the government, or I have to support the government, or I cannot argue with the government. So we'll see.
So you've taken the Victorian government to the Supreme Court because they've given you orders that you can't practice unless you're adhering to state government issued medical advice. Is that correct?
No, so I'm taking the medical board to the Supreme Court because the Victorian Tribunal, VCAT, have said that I must take care not to contradict public health policy. And I don't think there's any such law. I think that that's an invention. And I'm pretty sure that that's a slippery slope. If I'm a very well qualified doctor, and if I can't contradict the public health authorities, then nobody can. I'm also a pharmacist. I'm a registered pharmacist. I was a pharmacist for 10 years before I became a doctor. I have a Master's of Medicine from Sydney University. There's not too many doctors who are as well qualified as I am. I've done really good quality research in public health previously, and if I can't challenge the government about their health policies, then nobody can.
I want to get your opinion as a doctor on what you think of the public health messaging during the pandemic. So Tim Quilty's speech today about getting kicked out of Parliament for not wanting to share his medical history. It's quite a powerful one. He put that up on Facebook and Twitter today, well worth watching. So he said in his speech that the government went straight to mandates for vaccination instead of public education and public health campaigns that other countries like Japan did. What are your comments on how Australia in general handled the vaccine rollout program?
So the difficulty is when you want to rush things like new drugs, is that it's fraught with danger, and we've had terrible things happen in the past when drugs have not been properly scrutinised before they're used. So people, including myself and many other doctors, are quite rightly concerned about the speed with which this was rushed through, because it was not only just a new vaccine, it was also a novel delivery method with the mRNA vaccines. So people were quite reasonably concerned about this. But what happened was the mandate smashed them into submission. And the thing that I don't understand is the High Court of Australia has been very clear about this some 60 or 70 years ago. After the Second World War, the High Court of Australia said that people cannot be coerced into having medical procedures, and they defined coercion as including the loss of your job. And it's black and white. And they repeated the same thing a little bit later. If people are interested, that's the British Medical Association case versus a Commonwealth. And it's about paragraph 58 or 59. And then the Australian government and the state governments went ahead and did exactly this. They coerced people into having this medical treatment by threatening their jobs. And then when they come to you as a doctor and they say, I'm very distressed and I can't do this, if we then treated them as a patient, we were then punished. And some doctors have been struck off for providing necessary and appropriate medical exemptions. And some doctors have even been struck off or suspended for providing necessary and appropriate treatment of COVID. It is just beyond belief that the medical board would suspend a doctor for actually treating a patient with necessary and appropriate treatment. But this is what is happening.
So if you were to get elected to represent the great people of Ovens Valley, and Tim Quilty hopefully re-elected in the upper house representing Northern Victoria, what would be the one key issue that you would prosecute this government or the incoming government for?
So we really need to build the Big Buffalo Dam. In the 1960s, they bought the land and they set aside quite a large area of land for, we call it the Big Buffalo Dam. There's a small dam there, but they've set aside this land. They purchased this land for the Big Buffalo Dam, and it's quite large. It's a significant proportion of like the big dams in America. So with a dam that size, you can solve a lot of the problems that are issues for everyone. But you can do renewable energy with hydroelectricity. You can do irrigation in droughts. You can do flood mitigation. So if you've got too much rain, the dams can hold some of that back. The dams also provide river health for the environment by providing a constant stream of water. They provide recreation, tourism. You have to build them. A big dam costs about $500 million. So there's a fair bit of employment involved. But even at $500 million, that's only a 40th of the cost of the desalination plant. The desalination plant in Victoria is going to cost about $20 billion, and they could have built 40 large hydroelectric dams, and we wouldn't be having these discussions about renewable energy because it would already be there. So that's what I do. I'd push them to build the Big Buffalo Dam for all those reasons.
And it sounds like you would be a voice of reason with experience and history and education, a doctor in the lower house. That's what we needed during this term of government, that's for sure. So thank you for speaking out. We've got a lot of people in the chat sharing their experience with the mandate and vaccination and how they tried to basically say we didn't want this to be held against us for our job, which you said the High Court case. A lot of people talking about that as well. So thank you for sharing your story. I'll get you to stay on the screen. Dr. Richard Peppard is running in the seat of Hawthorn. Matt Ford, fantastic Mr. Matt Ford, is the Southern Metro Upper House candidate covering that region. Dr. Peppard, a neurologist, lives in Hawthorn. Hawthorn values science, the environment, and good sense. One of his quotes, "When you're in a hole, stop digging." Richard hopes to get us out of the hole that the Andrews government has dug through overreach, debt, corruption, capital overruns, and energy folly. I know you're very passionate about energy, Dr. Peppard. You ran in the seat of Melbourne at the federal election against Adam Bant. So good on you for trying. 1.6%, not bad. It's a bit hard in Melbourne CBD. So Dr. Peppard, welcome to the show again. You're no stranger to Liberty Chat, and I like your mustard shirt. Can you please tell us how you became a libertarian for starters, and then I'll get your comments on some things that Dr. Fidge said.
Thanks, Kate. I'm wearing mustard with a black raincoat over that to deal with Melbourne weather and to show the colours of the team. Hopefully there's a few Tigers supporters in our seat as well. I'm a neurologist. Just in terms of what Julian was just saying, Julian knows much more about these difficulties with the medical authorities and challenges the government, and I've looked to him for his opinion, which I greatly respect on that. I know his curriculum vitae, and he's an outstanding family doctor in the Ovens Valley and Wangaratta. So lucky to have people like him, and then we're lucky to have people like him standing up for the medical profession, these basic principles of patient-doctor confidentiality, patient privacy, choice over treatments, and avoidance of coercion, where in the case of a novel vaccination and a threatening pandemic, things should all be about education, information, persuasion, recommendations, rather than regulation and jackbooted police and incompetent medical authorities promoted well above their level of ability. But yes, I got 1.6% against Adam Bant, who got 49.6%. I was running on a looming energy crisis. He was running on a looming climate crisis. About a month later, there was an energy crisis, and the weather got unusually cold. But all weather these days, to the green steels and those etc., is a function of climate change. They seem to imagine that that's what the climate scientists predicted. It takes the likes of Andrew Bolt to remind us constantly that the scientific advisors to government were saying the rain will not fall, and it will not fall and fill the dams, and it is not worth building dams. And of course, here with Australia plagued by floods again this year over wide areas, we don't have dams for the triumvirate of functions that Julian mentioned, of storing water for hydro, for flood mitigation, and for irrigation and farming, and even managing it properly so there's proper ecological flows from these rivers. So, you know, the world has gone crazy in this, you know, sea like Hawthorne. Hawthorne, I look on as a bellwether seat. It's part of the federal seat of Kooyong that Josh Frydenberg lost to the Teals, Monique Ryan, like myself, a neurologist, her pediatric neurologist, me about parties, so it's very but I do get back into looking after teenagers at times. But there is a race to the bottom of, you know, how quickly you can do, how radical your CO2 targets can be, how quickly you can turn off fossil fuels, how quickly you can turn off gas. But all of this is going to lead to a crisis. Only with this year that Liddell had closed, but we've had a touch this year in April of under-maintained major coal-fired power stations in Victoria and New South Wales as part of the national electricity market, closing down for scheduled or unscheduled repairs, and then that led to this crisis in the NEM, where the AEMO had to take it over, and electricity prices were up to $300 per megawatt hour, where, you know, just a couple of years ago it was $50 per megawatt hour, so six-fold increase. It's massive amounts. It's come down somewhat since then, but, you know, the so-called renewables that fluctuate around wildly, and they're not taking into account the backup from something that's reliable, like hydro, like nuclear, like coal. The race is to replace things that are steady and reliable with something that's intermittent, and this will just lead to an electricity disaster.
Now, unfortunately, we are having audio issues with you, Dr. Peppard. I'm not sure why, because before the show it was good. I have been trying to fiddle around on my end, but there's something not working on your end. So I might just finish this segment here and then bring you back in later if we can fix your sound. Thank you for being on the show, doctors. Dr. Peppard, I'll try and get you back in if we can fix your audio issues. So Dr. Julian Fidge, as I said, running in Ovens Valley for us. Very interesting story, Dr. Fidge. Thank you for running for Lib Dems. Thank you for speaking out. I know in this environment, a lot of doctors, nurses are being cancelled for sticking to their principles. So thank you for running for us. Dr. Peppard, I'll try and bring you back in later because of your sound issues. So I'm just going to remove you both from the screen. Thanks again for joining us. Thank you. Dr. Peppard, I think I'll get someone to give you a call and they can try and help you with your issues, because you're a fantastic candidate and we definitely want to hear your opinions on energy. I've had the opportunity to hear his views before. He's a fantastic candidate for us. So for the next segment of the show, I am going to bring in two other lower house candidates. So hopefully Stephen is there. Yes, there he is, popped up now. So these two candidates bring joy to my little heart. Here we go. So these are the Narre Warren North and Narre Warren South candidates. So they are both running in David Limbrick's upper house electorate of South East Metro. Christine Scrobo and Stephen Matulak. Thank you for being on Liberty Chat. I know you've both been very excited to be on the show. It was my fault the show was cancelled last week. I was extremely unwell. I'd lost my voice. I couldn't even speak. I know some people would find that a bit of a break not hearing me speak, but I'm back. So I'll start by introducing Christine. She is running Narre Warren South. She did run as a candidate at the federal election in the seat of Bruce, and she achieved a remarkable 5%. So congratulations, Christine. You have been in the local paper, the Berwick Star, and you said you're running because you're tired of seeing governments take zero fiscal responsibility and continue increasing our debt. That will then be passed on to my generation. You just turned 21, so it is your generation that's going to settle this debt. And you've also talked about school choice in a few of your interviews, saying that's a particular issue you're passionate about. But I'll go back to the start of your story, I did hear a little story that you used to draw hammers and sickles on your school folders. We won't hold that against you, but that is a good segue to say, how did you go from that to a libertarian and a Liberal Democrat candidate, not once, but twice, only 21, running under David Limbrick's electorate? Please tell me how you became a libertarian. I'm dying to know.
All right. So I have come to libertarianism from a very, very far left side of politics. It's a long story of how I kind of saw the light and got to the right side of politics. But to summarize it and make it pretty brief, essentially a few years ago, I made a conscious decision to step out of my echo chamber and start consuming some content from the other side of politics, so the very right conservative side. And then after a while, I kind of realized that I don't really disagree with everything that they've got to say. And then I realized that the thing that's in common with the things that I support on the left and then the things that I support on the right, the one thing that's in common with that is that they both support individual rights and freedom. So, for example, on the left, I support the legalization of cannabis and vaping, but then on the right, I really do support freedom of religion and free speech and things like that. And then throughout the pandemic, after I left the left side of politics, I was politically homeless and I was looking for a new home. So I found the Liberal Democrats. Then I saw David and Tim attending the protests and opposing the government every single time, especially when it really mattered. And then I started to follow them on social media. I read up on the policies, the principles, and then it was a no-brainer to join the party. Because when you're a party that's based on a philosophy, it's crystal clear what you're going to support and what you're going to oppose in Parliament. I know that I can trust any Liberal Democrat in Parliament because they're not going to vote for an increase in tax and they're not going to vote for a decrease in liberty. So essentially, I decided to give it another run for the state election because I wasn't going to sit back and watch things get progressively worse, which they no doubt will if this current government gets back in and continues to hold power. We need people in there who are going to defend liberty. We need people who are going to oppose the government every single time they try to give themselves more power, and that's what I promise to do if I am elected.
Fantastic. So we did have David and Tim. The graph came out this week. They voted against the Labor government the most amount of times, and only 22% of times they voted in favour. So we do work with governments when they're putting through good legislation. We're not just there to block everything. We would never vote for a reduction in liberty or increase in taxes. Every Liberal Democrat that is pre-selected has to make that pledge. And if they're elected, that's what they're held to. We've had Senator David Leyonhjelm and Duncan Spender. They stuck to that. Aaron Stonehouse in WA, he stuck to that, and Tim and David as well. So we have a track record of sticking to our word. So you know you get what you vote for with us. We're not populist politicians. We're principled, as Christine just fantastically said. So you have been out at pre-polls since last Monday. I've spoken to you a few times. What are people telling you on the ground in your electorate of Narre Warren South? What are the main issues that they're concerned about?
Well, in my electorate, the main issue here is the Hallam Road tip. So this issue, it's completely multifaceted, but essentially the residents here were promised that as soon as this tip was filled, that they would return it to parkland. But now the council that's currently under administration, we don't have any elected councillors here, is trying to push through this plan to turn it into a waste transfer station after the tip is full. And as you would think, residents are really concerned about this. They're completely opposed to this. The health impacts are obviously a major concern. Residents are constantly putting in reports to the EPA. They would be increasing the buffer zone up to 500 metres, which could see property prices in the area fall by up to 30%. So David and I went to a protest about a week ago that the residents here put on, and we got to hear what people had to say. And we're just completely disgusted by the lack of community consultation with the issue. They were only given 3 weeks to give feedback on a document that would have taken 3 weeks to even read and understand. We're completely opposed to that increase in buffer zones, obviously being a clear property rights violation. And we think that the government needs to work on assisting and supporting waste solutions that would help close down these landfills, like waste to energy, which was what was supposed to happen before the government stopped around as usual, and now that facility isn't ready yet. The current Labor MP here is not interested in hearing about this issue at all. I've heard from many residents that he's liberally using the block button on Facebook, and just being at pre-poll, it's very clear that he does not share the same concerns as the residents that actually live here and are affected by this issue. So I promise to take action on this issue if I'm elected.
Yes, and I believe there is a big billboard going up tomorrow on Hallam Road with your beautiful face on it and David Limbrick saying, "Stop the landfill," because that's what they were promised, and that promise has been broken. So good on you for going down there and standing with David to talk about that. I'll bring Stephen into the conversation now. So Stephen Matulak is our Narre Warren North candidate for neighbouring electorate to Christine. That is still in David Limbrick's upper house electorate of South East Metro. And Stephen, you, in one of your interviews, you've been in the local papers as well. You've said politics has such a large effect on our lives and every vote matters. So I'd like to see more young people take an interest. And you said, I want to make sure that neither side of politics becomes too extreme and that we can respect each other's personal choices. Not a lot of respect for each other's choices the last few years. And I think that both sides are becoming quite extreme. So how did you become a libertarian, Stephen? Were you drawing hammers and sickles on your folders like beautiful Christine? Or where did you come to our...
Well, I actually came from the other side. I was actually extremely conservative politically in high school. So I was a big sort of One Nation fan, big sort of, Bernie Finn kind of very sort of right-wing conservative kind of person. Never interested in, because my family escaped communism. My granddad was very outspoken on that, so I never went to the left in my entire life. And I guess sort of as soon as the pandemic started, as soon as the first restrictions came in, I'm like, what the hell does the government think they're doing? Telling me how to live my life, telling people what to do in their own homes. I was very annoyed about that just straight away. I was very unpopular about it because a lot of people were sort of afraid and sort of saying, what the hell do you think you're doing? There's like something going around, you're just like walking in like a fool, like not caring. So I was sort of like that. And then I sort of very early on, I think it might have been the first protests or something, just a small one, because I followed a guy on YouTube called Marty Fokker. Some of you might know him. He was just going around living his life, recording things. He was, I think, episode from the street station with a couple of people. David Limbrick was actually there speaking to those few people there. So I said, hey, who's this guy? It's actually a politician who's actually on the ground talking to the community, listening to the community's concerns. And I'm like, hey, like, I like this guy. Like, he's doing what he should be doing. And I sort of looked into David, looked into Liberal Democrats, and sort of looked at the principles of sort of the classical liberalism and sort of said, well, hey, like, maybe this is right. Like, I'm going to make a decision about not to be controlled by the government. Like, maybe it's right that if I want people to respect my decision, maybe I should also learn to respect their decision. And that's sort of when it comes to freedom of choice thing and sort of those more, I guess, social issues, which I was sort of more conservative on, forcing that conservative agenda onto other people when I was younger. Sort of realized, well, hey, maybe I should respect other people's personal choices if I want them to respect me. And that's sort of how I got the journey to libertarianism.
So what made you put your hand up to run as a candidate for us, for the Lib Dems?
Well, I was 19 at the federal election, so I did a lot of volunteering. I did lose my job because of the mandate, so I was actually pretty much a full-time volunteer, 12 hours a day, every day at the pre-poll. So I did enjoy that, and I thought, well, I didn't really have much experience, so I'd do that first. And I actually was my intention before I volunteered to actually run as a candidate at the state election. I already sort of said I want to do that. I wanted to obviously be a volunteer first, and sort of I liked talking to people about issues, and sort of said, well, hey, I'm a person who's sort of very outspoken. I don't mind. I might not be popular. People might not like me, but I'm like, hey, I'm happy to deal with that, take the criticism, and just sort of be someone who puts my hand up for a cause that I want to do.
Well, you are both very resilient people at your age. I don't think I was as aware as you guys. So well done on both of you for putting your hand up. Stephen, what have you heard in your electorate as the main issues that are affecting people? What policy is the trigger for people in Narre Warren North?
Well, the issue is actually probably Daniel Andrews, the biggest issue. I've had a lot of people come in and say, a few words, probably I shouldn't be saying on camera, about him. He's definitely been the biggest impact about about voters not being happy. I've actually had a few people ask me about drugs. I've actually got a few votes. People asking me about the policy, asking me asking all the parties like what I think of drugs, what's the policy on drugs, and I sort of talked about the principles of us and said, like, look, we should be not throwing people in jail for putting something in their body when they're not harming anybody else, and this war. And a lot of people like that, and I got votes out of a few people who are talking about drugs. So that's something that I've been asked about a few times, especially. Still as the anti-ban, sort of anti-lockdown, I've had a few people as well come to us about as well. Probably the two biggest things I've probably heard of.
And you've been speaking at a few different events, particularly religious events. How have you gone there, and what are the main issues people are asking you in that sort of environment?
So I went on Sunday night, probably about an audience of 40 people. It was really positive. I'd say I was probably the most successful person there. I had the Liberal Party and Independent and the Freedom Party come. There were other questions about religious freedom and especially the pandemic bill and the mandates. When I spoke about the mandates and the pandemic bill, I got a really positive response from the audience. Religious freedom as well is very important. I did mention this, like how we voted against the suppression bill last year, which was very important to religious freedom and individual rights, especially for adults. So I did talk about a lot of people to the audience. It was very positive. I had a few people at the end saying, like, you spoke really well. The way you came across was really good. Like, they knew David Limerick and the party. They appreciate what we've done. So it was extremely positive from the religious crowd, and it was very good.
It's fantastic. You can talk about drugs at pre-poll and then go and talk to the religious people on Sunday, and both of them like what you have to say. That's the good thing about our party. We've got something for everybody, and we're driven by principles, not populist policies of the day, promising what people want to hear. We'll give both of you the opportunity, because one of the criticisms that you probably had is your age. So, are you experienced enough to be in politics? Why should we vote for you when you're a little bit younger? You've only been allowed to vote for the last few years or so. So, Christine, I'll start with you. What do you say when people? It's ageist, I know, but I'm just giving you the platform to give yourself the pitch as why age shouldn't matter, and I don't think age should matter at all in a lot of things. And as long as you're an adult, that's the libertarian way. So, what do you say when people question if you've got enough experience at your young age of 21?
I mean, as a young person, I'd be particularly more concerned about the impacts of the policies that we put in place today, the impacts that they're going to have in the future, because it will affect me and it will affect the generation after. Whereas people in the older generation might only be focused on what's the impact it's going to have right now. So that's kind of my pitch, that I have that long-term thinking instead of that thinking in election cycles, what's going to matter in 3 years. I'm thinking what's going to matter in 50 years' time.
Yeah, fantastic. And Stephen, what do you say if people ask if you're old enough to be a politician?
Well, I think that everything should be based upon merit and equality of opportunity. So I think that if you are obviously mature enough, maybe to a point, to be able to take criticism and you're up for the job, I don't see why it shouldn't be based on age. Like, I would say, well, there's people in their 40s and 50s who are in Parliament, and a lot of people aren't happy with them. They've had, corruption and stuff like that. So it's like, well, those people can't do their job properly either. So I don't think that just shows that you could be a middle-aged adult and you still can't necessarily do your job properly. So I think that merit is always the best way.
Fantastic. You two, what are my favorite two lower house candidates? If I'm allowed to say that, I say that to everybody, though. I think people have noticed that by now. Thank you so much for joining us on Liberty Chat. We've got the Narre South, Narre North covered. Christine Scrobo, Stephen Matulak, they'll be on the ground tomorrow, Friday and Saturday. If you see them, please go up and say thank you for running for the Lib Dems. This is the future of our party. This is the future of Australia. So thank you for running for us, and keep up the good work. And we'll see you on the ground during the next few days. So I'm going to boot you from the chat now. Stay in the chat. If people have questions, you can ask and they'll answer. A lot of people saying well done. So thank you, guys. Just move you now. Just fills my heart with joy seeing young people running for politics. So I'm 35, so I'm a veteran Lib Dem. I've been in this party for 7 years and counting. I'm still here. I've worked in Sydney, Perth and Victoria now for elections. It's absolute privilege working for the Lib Dems and to see young candidates involved, and they knocked it out the park. I tested them. I didn't brief them on what I was going to ask them about. Principled libertarians, you don't need to brief them. They already know. So to finish off the show, we have fantastic, popular, charismatic candidate who is going to carry the Western Victoria team, because the lead candidate as a mum, She's got a little baby at home that's not cooperating, so I'm going to add him to the stream now. He is a familiar face to Liberal Democrats. This is, of course, the popular, charismatic Paul Barker. Hello, Paul. Welcome to Liberty Chat.
Hey, Kate. Thanks for joining.
We lost you at the start of the show. I had to move things around. That's okay. It's an election campaign. There's things happening. Things are falling down everywhere, but we keep going to November 26, 6 o'clock, and then we all relax. So, Paul Barker, I'll give you an introduction for those of you who haven't come across you before. You've had a myriad of jobs. You've been in the Air Force, skydiving instructor. I heard you were out skydiving recently, I think. You're a councillor for Surf Coast Shire. You ran as a candidate for Corangamite at the federal election. You wear a number of hats in the Lib Dems. You're serving on the national executive at the moment, and you put your hand up to run as the number 2 to Julia McGrath in Western Victoria. You could have been number 1. Everybody knows that, but you took one for the team, and you've run number 2. How are you, and how's the campaign going in Western Victoria?
Honestly, I'm a little tired, but we've got a few days to go. The campaign has been going swimmingly well.
Good. So you're Geelong. We've got Ballarat covered. I know there's people on the ground there. Lots of signs going up on the highway saying these potholes need to get fixed. So I know you guys have got it covered out there. How's pre-poll, and what's the mood like with your constituents?
Really good. Obviously, anyone that's done pre-poll or volunteering on election day would have seen that the majority of people go for a red, blue or green socialist how to vote card, and it can be a little bit demoralising, but we get more than enough come directly for us and plenty that are open-minded and looking for a genuine, sensible alternative, and we definitely are that choice. Anyone that pays attention to politics, that has seen what's been going on and values individual liberty, obviously is a natural supporter of ours. But I'm just a little bit concerned that not enough people have hit their tipping point when they say enough is enough. But eventually it will get to that point, and we will be here to make sure that we can represent those people effectively in parliaments at every level.
So you did run in the lower house, Corangamite, at the Fed election. You polled about 2.5%. Reflecting on the federal campaign, they returned a Labor MP. Is there a mood for change in the electorate compared to the federal election?
More so, because Corangamite is largely peri-urban, where Western Vic region is substantially rural. And on the campaign trail, both Julia and I have headed out far west. She took the top half of the near 80,000 kilometre square electorate. I took the bottom half, and we've both had really, really supportive public engagement out west. Definitely a lot of support in the more urban areas. But yeah, I'm quietly confident we're going to see a significant increase in support compared to the 2018 state election for Western Victoria.
And you've been out at pre-poll since last week on and off. I know it's been horribly cold and windy and wet out there. It's been the same as in Melbourne, to be fair. What's the mood like in terms of what the main issue voters are asking you about, and what do they want to see change?
At pre-poll, for where I've been, a lot of people aren't too keen to talk about specific topics. They're not even really prepared to engage in a conversation. So I can't say too much to that. But what I can say is that with my engagement with the community on the various treks that we've done out west, is that most people I've talked to are significantly dissatisfied with the major parties. And we'll wait and see how that translates at the polls.
Now, going back to the federal campaign, you, of course, starred in the Freedom Manifesto, Freedom from Surveillance Policy video. You're an actor as well for the Lib Dems. Good on you. We saw data from the Victorian COVID app sent to the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, of all places. It came out in the news a few weeks ago in relation to the concerns about data mining. In WA, the police accessed the data there to investigate crimes, despite us being told it was only for contract tracing purposes. Is surveillance and the surveillance state still a concern to you? And what have you seen at a state level to spark any concerns that you have about surveillance in particular?
Absolutely. The surveillance issue is actually one that I was driving the other day and I saw a government traffic surveillance car. And I was just like, they are just addicted to surveillance, and anyone who pays attention to the way society is shifting understands that surveillance and data are the new gold mines. If you can build up a data bank or have access to that sort of information, it puts you one step ahead, and whether it's a commercial means or some other. If we don't have significant representation at parliaments at every level, I think the surveillance state is just going to grow, and it's going to result in people having, and it's not a conscious thing, like anyone that understands surveillance and how it impacts a person's behaviour knows that when you're under surveillance, you change your behaviours. And most people are well-meaning people and wouldn't cause harm to others, but when you've got that eye of government bearing down upon you, it does change things. And for me, I don't think it results in a free and prosperous society that can actually thrive. I think it's just a massive anchor on our ability to evolve and adapt positively.
So for the last 4 years, Tim Quilty has been the voice for regional Victoria for those who value liberty, freedom and lower taxes. Western Victoria, very exciting seat, very important seat. Lib Dems, fantastic candidates there, Julie McGrath and yourself. What would be your views on Tim Quilty's favourite topic, Brexit? So the regional exit, creating a state.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so tell us, convince the people in Melbourne why we should let the rest of Victoria have their own little state. See if you can outpitch Tim Quilty.
Well, Western Victoria is actually primed for a Brexit. We've got a deep sea port in Portland. We've got an international airport in Avalon. So we can cut off the rest of Victoria around Little River and create our own super state that is free from the government intervention absolutely decimating the timber industry. But guess this, they've shut down the timber industry to the degree that the government are now paying the costs for these businesses that have been shut down. So, one, we've got the businesses not able to turn an income to support themselves, nor to pay the taxes to support the ever-growing state. But we've now got the rest of the taxpayers handing out hand over fist to keep these companies going that just want to get going. It is absolute lunacy. So, Western Victoria is primed for a Brexit, and I challenge Tim Quilty. I'm laying it down here. We'll get Western Vic separated, Brexit style, from Victoria before he can get his Murray area all sorted. So,
well, we have Tim in the chat, who, of course, is Tim Quilty's number 2 in Northern Victoria, saying yes to Brexit. So somehow we've doubled our policy from one Brexit to 2 in the last episode of Liberty Chat. Sorry to the policy people who've been working on these policies, getting all the boxes checked. We've just changed it at the last minute. That's okay. We can run with it. So, Paul, can you please tell us a little bit about Julia? She's not on the show, as I said before. She is the lead candidate. I've had the pleasure of working with her in David Limbrick's office for a brief amount of time. I first came across her on the Ladies' Night Liberty Chat back in the Fed campaign, and Dr. John Humphreys himself called me afterwards and said, who was that? She is a fantastic candidate, principled libertarian, smart as a tack. She could run rings around the people in Parliament House, as could you. What's it been like being her running mate, Paul?
Absolutely brilliant. As you alluded to before, because I'm a Surf Coast councillor, I've got no desire to get elected for the state election at this point. With Julia, she is a weapon. She is a lawyer by trade. She's cut her teeth in some pretty high-level activities. She had a significant, most part, for the development of the policy that we're taking to this state election. She's a lovely person, young mum, got a partner that I'd actually like to thank her partner for having conversations to bring her along. And yeah, I just look forward to more Julia McGraths being born out of Western Vic and putting together a formidable team for future elections.
Yes, at the Crile Castle campaign launch, David Limerick got up and said if Julia McGrath was the first female Lib Dem elected for us, he would be over the moon, as would I, as Lady Liberty, 100% endorse her. Along with Mayor Tessa too, just fantastic to see so many female candidates involved in the party. It's truly grown over the last 7 to 8 years I've been around. She also quoted Ronald Reagan saying government is not the solution to our problem, government is a problem. John Ruddock, I think that made his eyes light up because Ronald Reagan is his favourite US politician. If he had a son, he would call him Ronnie Ruddock. So Julia, we love her. And Paul, we're so grateful that you've been by her side this whole time because you're well known in the party, well respected. You bring joy to everyone that you meet. I remember I met you in South Australia and we were there for the state election earlier this year. And anyone that walked into the room, Paul, you managed to convert them to a Libertarian in less than 5 minutes. I was very impressed.
Even the people in the room next door.
Yeah, even the people not there for the Lib Dems. One final question I do have to ask you is, what do you think is going to happen on Saturday? What is your prediction for this election?
Based on early reports, I hope that Ian Cook gets up, and I think that's probably one of the most important thing for a lot of people, but more importantly, from my perspective, is that I hope we improve our primary votes in every region and every district by at least 50%, which I think is a safe bet. And really, we're in a position that we could potentially get up to 5 candidates elected. That'd be a very big long shot. But what it's really going to come down to is people manning the booths. And the areas that we have to cover are phenomenal. And even in the lower house districts, there's a lot of booths to cover. And we are run on people power. And if we are short of people, we will struggle. But if we can get every man, woman, dog, baby, child, echidna, platypus handing out how to vote cards for us, then we will do really, really well.
Yes, and there's still time to volunteer. You can email Julia's campaign. I'll put the email in the chat, or Paul Barker, you put that on your Facebook page. There are ways to get involved, or just email beautiful Chloe at head office, Chloe, eo@ldp.org.au, and she can forward that to anyone. Anything you can do to help. As you heard, Paul, you're covering a massive area in Western Vic. Not as big as Tim Quilty's electorate, I can hear him saying that, but still the region's very important. And a lot of people have commented that there are a lot of libertarians out in the region. I'm a country girl, I'm a libertarian. There are a lot of us out there, but we just don't know it. So if we have people on the booths like Paul to give you that 1 minute pitch, you'll be converted like that. And then our party will continue to grow. So I will be in Western Vic on the 21st of December in Ballarat at the branch meeting. I was meant to be there last week. I apologise. I was sick as a dog. I couldn't get out of bed. And that's saying a lot because I'm a workhorse and I don't like being out of action. But I'll be at Ballarat. I'm happy to come to Geelong too, Paul, if you would like me to come to your next branch meeting. I love coming out to the regions. But thank you for filling in for Julia. I will keep you on the screen. We do have Dr. Richard Peppard, who's sorted out his audio, thanks to James, my colleague, for giving him a call. So, Paul, I'll keep you there as you provide good comment. And feel free to ask Dr. Richard Peppard any questions. Hi, Richard. Let's just make sure we can hear you. Hello.
Can you hear me all right this time?
That's much better. Thank you. So
sorry about that.
that's okay. It's been one of those weeks, nights, years. We've had
I had some
Christine
Bluetooth
Abrams out.
earphones sitting around, and they were trying to connect
Yes.
as well. Anyway, look, I don't want to say everything I said again. I want to be brief. The theme in Hawthorne, which is part of the federal seat of Kooyong, is very important because it relates to the movement of teals and greens in combination with Labor to race to the bottom on how quickly they can have aims to get CO2 reductions down. And that to libertarians, we're not, we don't have a strong position on climate science. We're against climate alarmism, but we're certainly against excessive government interference. And this is where it hits against libertarianism, because all of these targets mean increased government interference in the energy market. And this is going to be extremely important because it's already grossly distorting energy markets and leading to wholesale and retail increases in gas and electricity prices, which will have a major effect on people's where electricity bills are a big part of their income. So people will become energy poor and struggle in the coming years. This is not some lunatic fringe view, but the views of Treasury predictions, and there's no end in sight to how bad it could get from year to year as we fail on these impossible practicalities of rolling out 10,000 kilometres of pylons and wires, a spider web all over the Western District, let alone the Eastern Victoria and Northern Victoria, but particularly the Western District. And 20,000 solar panels a day, 40 wind farms a day that cost 10 times as much, and you're already locking in a very high price for them. And here we're following lunatic climate scientists. They're only matched by lunatic chief health officers, I think, who say the rain won't fall or fill the dams, where the Thompson Dam is overflowing for the first time for 26 years, and most of us have noticed the variations in our weather. So we're as Julian Fidge was saying before, we've missed the long lead time to build dams for irrigation, for hydro, and for flood mitigation in these wet years. And maybe in the next 7 years will be El Nino years, and they'll be the climate alarmists will be saying, well, we told you so, but they don't. Any weather event, they say they told you so. It's a crazy time, and it's going to get crazier next year. If we have a disappointing result, I think we must push on, because when Liddell closes next year without an adequate backup, the truth and the reality will start to hit the wall for more and more ordinary Australians paying electricity bills with their jobs threatened and so on. And we need to be a light of hope, an alternative view, influencing the major parties and offering a democratic alternative to it.
So, Richard, I have to ask, what's your opinion on the SEC, Dan's pet project? He promised it in his final pitch last night on the Sky News debate. I've got David Limbrick was playing people score and bingo, and he won. We had words like level crossing, Nazis, 1 in 100-year global pandemic, lower bills, cost of living. That's what they were talking about in the leaders' debate.
Well, again, look, we're small government people. We would always vote against something that represents the socialisation of a major power industry, and the reason for that is that it will be inefficient, and then the government can cover up its commercial failures for year to year by just increasing our taxes and increasing our debt and deficit. So it's a recipe for disaster. But I'm of a certain age where I remember the SEC is relatively responsible and run by engineers, but the libertarian principles are clearly against nationalising or this socialist program, particularly in this context of moving to an investment that's already failing in unreliable, intermittent, so-called renewable energy sources.
And just to go back to your seat in Hawthorne, what's the mood like in your electorate on pre-poll? What are people telling you? Is there a mood for change? How's it going out there?
It's pretty dismal, really. The main move is still a three-way split between Labor, Greens and Teals. In Hawthorn, there's Swinburne University, there's a lot of young people, and we just don't, despite fantastic young people we just heard from today from both ends of the political spectrum. We just don't seem to be drawing enough in. We can do it, it's possible, but the Teals seem to have these, and Greens seem to be manned by young people who've never paid taxes or an electricity bill yet, and retirees who've given up paying taxes and live on the state, maybe the public sector. So it's kind of dismal, but I know this will appeal to many in the party. There's quite a decent guy as a Liberal candidate. We've got Family First and Labor DLP. And so those four groups of the classical Liberal supporters, all of whom are emphasising affordable, reliable energy, even though the Liberal Party's policies puts a bum cheek on either side of the fence, so to speak. I'm mixing my metaphors here. They've still got dramatic CO2 reduction targets, but they're now pushing affordable, reliable energy, as are these other morally conservative parties. And coming back to what Stephen said, I've come from a sort of I like to think of myself as a lapsed moral conservative, but I'm 100% behind the party's approach of people living their life by their own lights and not imposing their views on other people, and that fits very well with a classical Liberal small government approach. We don't get into your personal morality, your bedrooms, your private life, your choices, your style, and in the same way, we want you to be entrepreneurial, to get the rewards of your labour, and it was through that outspoken good sense of David Limbrick during the early stages of the pandemic that I joined the LDP, and there's a little woman sitting in the background there. She joined ahead of me, and I followed her.
Well, good on you.
Again.
Good on you for running for us in Hawthorn in not a very winnable position for the party, but still doing what you can to promote the cause. And we're very grateful to have you, Dr. Peppard. Everybody loves you. Everyone loves having a chat to you and having a glass of red wine with you. So thank you for running for us. And thank you, Paul. Now, this is the end of the show. I'm going to just remove both of you from the screen while Richard finishes his drink. Thank you. Thank you. So we do have other lower house candidates. Max Payne running in Lara. He was meant to be on the show, but he's in the studio tonight. He's a piano teacher. Sorry for that he couldn't be with us. Kristen Abraham running in Frankston, of course, an area very close to David Limbrick's heart. She's been out at pre-poll every day. She is an absolute go-getter. We're so lucky to have her as well. She apologizes she couldn't make the show tonight. I know we're on the last stretch, guys. Everybody's feeling it now. Michael Aberman in Caulfield. We're actually doing a live stream with him tomorrow with David Limbrick and Paul Silverberg from his cannabis pharmacy. So you'll hear from him then on David's Facebook page. Dean Rossiter running in Benambra. I worked with Dean in former Senator David Leyonhjelm's office, principled libertarian, fantastic candidate. If you're in Benambra, please vote for him. Lance Smart in Albert Park, or Lance is probably how you say it here. Sorry, I'm from South Australia. Tam Turner in Dandenong, Anthony Cave in Northcote. There are other Legislative Assembly candidates. So we only have a few more days to go. This is a very important election. You don't need a Western Australian via South Australia via New South Wales to tell you that. I'm here to help because I know how important it is. And I've heard from so many of you about what you've suffered through in Victoria. Very traumatic the last few years. So please make sure you make your vote count. You vote below the line. That's what we're saying. You control your preferences. You control what number you put in the box. So please make sure you do your research. And we need people on the ground. As Paul said before, anything you can do to help, now is the time, even if it's for an hour, half an hour, the whole day, whatever you can do to help. Pre-poll tomorrow, Friday, and then the big day Saturday. If you want to help, please email beautiful Chloe, eo@ldp.org.au. Google any of the candidates. They've got their email addresses out there. Anything you can do to help, now is the time. I'm wearing this outfit because we're supporting Ian Cook in Mulgrave. David Limbrick is covering that electorate in the Up House, so that's your option there. Now I need to read out the authorisation so we don't get in trouble. Thank you for having me in Victoria. It's been an absolute honour, privilege, pleasure to be here. I've been so impressed with the team. I've been so welcome. I'm doing everything I can. I know a lot of people are as well. We're all feeling it now. Please look after each other. We're empaths and we give a lot, but we need to look after ourselves too. So give someone a hug, give someone a phone call, just do whatever you can. We can do it. We can make Victoria great again. And here is the authorisation for the last Liberty Chat of the Victorian State Election Series. We might be bringing it back for New South Wales if they give me a call. I'll wait by the phone. Authorised by R. Westgarth. He is a saint, by the way. Authorised by R. Westgarth, Liberal Democratic Party, 117/757 Burke Street, Docklands, Victoria, 3008. Thank you for watching Liberty Chat Victorian Election Series. See you next time, and vote Lib Dems on Saturday.